Namaskar and Jai Hind. Good morning once again. The inauguration of the PDNS 2021 being over, we now get down to business. In our first session, we'll be looking at disaster risk reduction and national, which is to be considered as a part of national security preparedness. And we are very fortunate to have a distinguished panel headed by an equally distinguished personality of General Vij. Allow me to say a few words about General Vij before I hand over the session to him, and he in turn would speak a few words about the two speakers. General Vij was commissioned into the Dogra Regiment and was the Chief of Army Staff from 31st December 2002 to 31st January 2005. And in fact, I've had the good fortune to serve as his principal staff officer. And like a loyal soldier, the day he retired, I also retired on the 31st of January. That's the only thing I share with him. Otherwise, he's miles ahead. Okay. He was also the chairman of Chiefs of Staff Committee at the time of the tsunami, which took place in 2004. And he was responsible for organizing massive response of the armed forces, including assistance to Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. As Director General Military Operations, everybody knows the acronym DGMO because we talk about the Pakistani DGMO and our DGMO conversing. He dealt with the coordination and execution of Operation Vijay, which was the Kargil War, as most of you would remember. That was to evict the Pakistani intrusion in Kargil in 1999. As Chief of Army Staff, his contribution he's made some signal contributions, and he's remembered for all those path-breaking. I'll just mention two of them. One was his vision, and which was conceptualized in a border fence all the way from the Chenab Junction all the way to the Zojila Pass, a distance of nearly 740 kilometers. And that fence actually prevented or made infiltration so difficult that the rate of infiltration significantly dropped thereafter. So that was one operational vision. Let me give you another vision, which was more in the welfare domain, and that was the ex-serviceman contributory health scheme, ECHS as it is called, for veterans, was also started during his time. It was part of his vision. On superannuation, he was appointed as founder, vice chairman of the National Disaster Management Authority. So you can say he's been a founding father of NDMA on the 28th of December 2005 for a tenure of 5 years, during which NDMA really came of age and became a very effective organ of the government or organization of the government, I might add. He also then thereafter became not only a member, but headed the well-known think tank, internationally well-known think tank of Vivekananda International Foundation, VIF, in New Delhi. He finally laid down those responsibilities as director of a VIF in 2017. But he continues to be sought after speaker, and people rush to him for consultation on many issues pertaining to national security. General Vij, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My salutations to some of the very distinguished guests of the day here. Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, with whom we did a lot of work when he was the chairman of the Finance Commission. And he really helped us in a big way in the disaster management. Mr. Halder, the old director of the IB, Mr. K.M. Singh, who was my colleague in the Disaster Management Authority. And as myself and General Patankar were talking before this, the only way to keep KM is really happy is to keep him busy. And he must remain busy in life. That is his mantra. And of course, our host of the day and the organizer of the entire show and navigator, as people are calling him, General Patankar. We did a lot of work together, a lot of it, which one cannot really, there's not the occasion to recapitulate that. But at the outset, I must thank the Pune International Center for giving me this opportunity to join you for this very important seminar. And I listened to some of the programs which I intend doing later in the day also. You have chosen a very apt theme because you have linked disaster risk reduction with the national security. And that is absolutely nothing can be more truer than this. And with this, I'll give a little talk on this subject of disaster management and disaster risk reduction, which it is now known and is more appropriately called. The most important thing is that disasters cause enormous loss of human lives, cattle, forest, wealth, property, infrastructure every year globally. And it amounts to almost 2% of the annual GDP, and that goes into hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, which this nation can really ill afford. Now, mitigating the impact of disasters earlier was linked only to the response, and it was purely response sector. As a matter of fact, you'll be surprised to know that till only about, say, 15 years back, rather 20 years back, this subject was being held by the Ministry of Irrigation and this thing, because they felt that it was only famine related. And that started from the Britishers' time. But with the onset of the 20th century and people becoming better educated on the subject and the expectations of the people growing and their growing recognition of the fact that reducing and managing disasters and the factors which cause these vulnerabilities only can prevent losses and alleviate the impacts of disasters. So now it has become far more all-encompassing. Now people are very keen that we identify the drivers of risk and make sure that our vulnerability and exposure to all such hazards are removed. So disaster risk reduction today is the call of the day and not the disaster management anymore, because that is far too limited in scope. I come to the next aspect, and the disaster risk reduction approach involves three factors. That is, number one is that impacts every segment of the society, governmental, non-governmental, essential, professional, private sector, everybody. Everybody is involved with it because everybody is affected by it. And it promotes resilience and nurtures a culture of prevention and also replaces the narrow concept of DM with people-centric and multi-sectoral aspects in nature. And last thing is, we must understand very well the evaluation of risk and the exposure and vulnerability of people to the assets and the disasters. Now, India is highly vulnerable to disasters, and that is our problem. And that is because of mainly because of the reason that we are in a geoclimatic zone, which is and landmass, which is very disaster prone. And that's why you saw with the climate change, especially now, that recently the floods and also the landslides in the area of Shimla, Uttarakhand, Kerala, we have suffered huge losses. Another aspect which is very important and which is not being talked of, unfortunately, today, but when we started with the concept of setting up this body, was the aspect of man-made disasters. And when we talk of man-made disasters, we cover all segments of that, and that means what we call CBRN: chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. And if that was so, if we was doing that as seriously as we started with it earlier, then perhaps during the pandemic, which ultimately we handled exceedingly well, but initially we had a lot of hiccups, like the present one, the COVID, we would have been able to do better. And today, as the things stand, in the organization, you do not even have a member who's from the medical fraternity, which was supposed to be there and which we had in our time. And we handled swine flu at that time reasonably well with the active assistants. And as a matter of fact, they were the doers and we were only behind the scenes suggesting them the things. So it is very important. And I think this is one aspect which is now being given lesser importance and must be brought back with full vigor and effort into the aspect of the disaster management. Now, I must also mention, as far as the World Risk Index is concerned, India has slipped in that because we still continue to have poverty, of course, will in the nation. I'll carry on for some time till we really progress well. Slums, housing, limited access to medical facilities, and also clean water, which of course a lot of emphasis is being laid now by the present government on the clean water and other aspects. And this aspect has got to be kept in mind. Now, the next thing is that as far as the disasters are concerned, they usher in poverty, because if you lose 2 years, 2% of your GDP every year, then the disasters will usher in poverty. And because you don't really grow that much more, and the poverty results in disasters. So it is a kind of a vicious cycle. So both contribute to each other and both aggravate each other. So that aspect we must understand. While the disasters are being well taken care of, the poverty will continue to remain as an important, as a inevitable part of our living. Now, I come to the next aspect in my talk, and that is the importance of disaster risk reduction in developmental strategy and its impact on national security. And that is the theme today, the impact on the national security. Now, heavy losses in human lives, properties, infrastructure, ecology, economy, due to recurring disasters cause enormous damage to the national interest, and these all result into affecting the national security as well. Now, a study conducted by the World Bank in 2003 suggested that natural disasters are major impediment in the path of economic development. And that applies to the entire world, not only to India. And they also recognize the fact that the flawed development has aggravated various types of vulnerabilities. And that's why the government of India, in the 10th five-year plan, that is in 2002 to 2007, that time we were still in active service, a chapter was included in the 10th five-year plan, which talked of disaster risk reduction, not disaster risk reduction. At that time, they talked of disaster management and advocated the concept at that time of disaster risk reduction as a part of the developmental society. So the effort has started long time back, and I'll come to the history later. And that is, okay. Now I come to the concept of disaster risk reduction. As mentioned by me a little earlier, the concept and practice of reducing disaster risk through various strategies, and these include two aspects, very important aspects: analyzing the causative factors and then managing them. And that is very important, that we analyze the causative factors and then manage them, because without that, you really cannot proceed systematically. Now, there are few factors which we got to take into account for that. Firstly is the wise management of land and environment. And as far as the land and environment is concerned, I must mention that unplanned and disorganized construction which is taking place is itself a cause of major disasters. And all this urban flooding which you see in all big cities like Chennai and Bombay and others is as a result of the lack of attention to this particular aspect and misuse of authorities to do things in a manner which are not perhaps very wise. All right. The next is the aspect of capacity building, because community is the first disaster responder and thereafter is followed by the others. So the capacity building, training people, educating them on this aspect is very important in relation to the kind of disasters which are prevalent in their areas. The third aspect, which is closely linked with it, is the awareness generation. And the last point, which is very important, is the last mile connectivity, especially in things like the floods and also the aspects of the cyclones. Now, I come to the next aspect, and because the world has been paying a lot of attention to it, and that is the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction. Sendai, as we all know, is located in the northern part of Japan. India is a signatory to this risk reduction of 2015 agreement, and that Sendai disaster risk reduction agreement commits us to the concept of sustainable development and poverty reduction. And that brings into it the aspect of policies, plans, and programs and budgets, which will be involved with the aspect of disaster risk reduction and its management. It states very clearly, and I'll read out that effective disaster risk management addresses underlying risk drivers. And risk drivers are very important part. I made a mention of them earlier also. And they have to be taken care of through risk-informed public and private partnership. That's very important, that public and the private partnership does come in. And that's why perhaps the aspect of corporate social responsibility has also come in. And they are supposed to give a certain percentage of the money they earn and devote that money towards the disaster risk reduction. And also important in this is that the risk-informed decision-making is taken. When any developmental risk reduction program, a developmental program is undertaken, it must be well informed on the aspects of disaster risk reduction. Now, as far as the present history of India's management of disaster is concerned, the entire effort really was formalized in 2005. But before that, I must mention, the effort really started around 6 years before 2005, when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, and a number of disasters occurred one after another in the following government also. That time, Odisha super cyclone took place in 99. I was DGMO that time. And the army got involved in Odisha super cyclone in a big way, because that was the only arrangement at that time besides the local police and the other organizations. Thereafter came the Bhuj earthquake. I was at that time in Pune as the army commander, so we naturally had a lot to do with it. And then, as General Patankar mentioned, when Congress government came into power, and that time the Indian Ocean tsunami took place, and in 2004, a lot of help was given by us. But that effort was carrying on from Mr. Vajpayee time, who had at that time constituted a committee where he was the chairman himself, and Mr. Sharad Pawar was the vice chairman. So when you talk of disaster management, no one government can take credit for that. All governments, both BJP and the Congress and the other governments in between, whatever was there, were part and parcel of this particular effort. And that's how in 2005, the Disaster Management Act in September 2005 was enacted. And that envisaged a paradigm shift from hitherto relief and response centric approach to a holistic approach which encompassed preparedness, prevention, mitigation, response, relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. That is the entire disaster management cycle. That all aspects of disaster management cycle were to be taken care of. It was to be a three-tiered organization, starting at the top with the National Disaster Management Authority in the center, headed by the Prime Minister himself, just like the Atomic Energy Commission and all that, so that you had a direct access to the Prime Minister and you could cut across the ministries. And of course, the people at that time were given the appropriate status so that they could talk to the their counterparts, like in the state, you could talk to the chief minister. That's why the vice chairman was given the status of a cabinet minister, and members were all ministers of state. And that facilitated the process of your acting and interacting with the others. The second was the state. In state governments, the similar kind of an organization was to be set up, and it was to be assisted by committees which were dedicated full time, and it was not a part-time work. And similarly, in the governmental organization was also to have, say, a joint secretaries and all that, who were dedicated to disaster management. Unfortunately, it didn't progress the way it should happen. The third tier, of course, was the tier of the District Disaster Management Authority, where the DC was the chairman, and with him were some members of the panchayat and all that. And that resulted into the public-private partnership and also some elected representatives. So they could all work together. Along with this organization, there was an institute set up by the name of National Institute of Disaster Management, and whose job was training, capacity building, and assisting all the governmental organizations, including the NDMA, and under the guidance of the NDMA, to carry out their work on training, courses, conferences, lectures, seminars, and other things. They were running regular programs, and they did a very good job in this. Now, the organization, when it was set up, they did a lot of work, but of course, it perhaps does not look very correct for me to talk myself, but I have to inform you of what all was done. We got involved in setting up the national policy, which was very important. That resulted into enhancing the coping capacities of the country in managing the disasters. Some programs were run like school safety, and also the capacity building program, like the mock drills. In each state, we started the mock drills, and it went on and became a very popular thing. Now states are doing on their own. But three major things which we did, and I leave it at that. The three major things were the National Disaster Response Force. That was the showpiece. And now today, you hear more of the NDRF than you hear more about the NDMA, that is the authority. As a matter of fact, we never called ourselves authority. Though the government gave us that name, we always called ourselves, Mr. KM Singh will recollect, as facilitator, because we thought authority was too obnoxious a word. And really, when we met the president that time, President Kalam, I remember his first question asking us was, are you fully empowered? And we really didn't have an answer to that, because the empowerment aspect, of course, was always a question mark as far as this organization was concerned. So when you call anybody an authority, you must have an authority which is really somewhat, which is effective. But anyway, by little tech and management, you could do a lot of work with the states. So the NDRF was the showpiece. I will not talk much about it because only two aspects. It was multidisciplinary and multi-skilled. It was raised from scratch from the four police forces. And it was proactive. The major aspect was that it was proactively available. If there was a cyclone season, this organization, some battalions were deployed in the area where the cyclones were expected at that part and time of the season. And similarly for the floods. And that was a huge, huge help. And the another thing is we ran number 2 after the NDRF, and because Mr. KM will talk a lot on that, so I leave it at that. And because he was also the heart and soul of that. Frankly, we all worked it out together, but the man who really drove it and put his heart and soul into it and made it a lifetime mission was Mr. KM Singh, and I'm glad that he's here today. And he's the one who is very active behind this particular today's program. The second thing was the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project, which was started in our time with the help of the World Bank. It was a World Bank project. It was supposed to be in 5 states, both on the eastern and the western coast. And but it started initially in the phase 1 in our time in Andhra Pradesh and in Odisha. And both these states are doing exceedingly well. And these are the most risk-prone states also. The 3 aspects in this were the last mile connectivity, which was very important. Number 2 was structural and non-structural measures. Behind the coastal zone, around 2 kilometers behind that, because up to which the fury of the cyclone really lasts, there were big shelters set up with medical facilities, with food and all that, and with also arrangement for the cattle to be kept there. So these were all the raised platforms. And of course, the third aspect was technical assistance, capacity building, and knowledge creation. Now, you see that first, the result of that is that as a result of this, we are doing, I think, better than any country in the world. Because first Odisha super cyclone, 9,987 people lost their life. The next Odisha cyclone which came, we lost only 45 people. The cyclone Fallen, we lost only 20 people. And so it has been happening over the years now, because that system has well set in and is working well. The third thing, and third major contribution besides many others, was the aspect of the tsunami early warning system, which was set up in Hyderabad. And it is one of the most state-of-the-art systems in the world. And it is giving help not only to itself, not only to India, but all the RIM countries, that is the 22 countries which stand to benefit by this, because they inform them all. So these were the aspects which we really, I can say, were the major contribution. That we planned many projects like the earthquake mitigation project, capacity building aspects, and one was also creating a national reserve of stores, which unfortunately never came into being despite all of our efforts, and many others. Last aspect I'll come to is the financial assistance. And the 13th Finance Commission, Mr. Kelkar is himself here. And as I said, he gave us a lot of help. One of the another factors which we took into account was our arrangements to fire the fire risk. And we found at that time when we were there that our arrangements were very poor. So we tried to, through the Prime Minister and through the Planning Commission, try to get some money allocated for the state, but didn't work out much. But ultimately, through the Finance Commission, they found an indirect approach of helping this out by giving money to the municipal committees, and they were given funds to raise this particular sort of capacity to fight the fire risk. The 15th Finance Commission has suggested creation of a mitigation fund. As a matter of fact, mitigation fund was also a part of the original Disaster Management Act, but that never came into being. That was one thing which was always lacking. But the 15th Finance Commission has now suggested that we have a mitigation fund. And I do hope this will come, because money is a very important part of disaster management and for your preparation. And but anyway, notwithstanding that, I think India has come a long, long way in managing and handling disasters. At least we are very good in response. The mitigation aspects are lacking, and also is lacking the aspect of the man-made disasters. That is the aspect of CBRN, and I think it is very important that that aspect is given full attention, and NDMA is brought back to the full capacity, so that they have all members and they work full time, and they are part and parcel of all the systems. And with that coming in, I think things will improve a lot. And if there is ever a pandemic again, like Mr. Somya Swaminathan mentioned, India will be well prepared even to fight a pandemic in future. Leave aside other things. And of course, the biological risks. Biological risks are very big. Chemical risks are very big. Nuclear, some exercises were started. Unfortunately, it didn't progress because that part of the membership was taken away and it is not there now. So that's all about all that I want to mention about the disaster risk reduction, and the fact that unless we make a very fulsome effort in this direction, unless you have a dedicated organization at all levels, that is at the national level, at the state level, and at the district level, and dedicated not only people are dedicated to it, people will be, they are affected, but the government or organization, they work full time on this particular thing, and the people who are allotted for this work full time on this. The progress will not be as wholesome as it should be. So a lot of work has been done, but still I think miles and miles to go. And with that, I thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you very much, and I'm grateful, Pat, for giving me this opportunity, and to your organization for inviting me for this morning's program. Thank you very much.
I request Shri V.C. Haldar to please make his presentation.
I must confess first that I am in a very unenviable position with General Vij chairing the thing, and Mr. A.M. Singh with all his experience speaking after me. And my job is to talk about the link between the national security and disaster management. I'm grateful to General Vij, because he admitted towards the end there are miles and miles to cross, because I think these miles are the problem that we see, because the tremendous work has been done by the people who are heading now and those who have headed in the past. But you need to, as General Vij said, that we need people at every level to be dedicated and committed to their job. There, I think some states have done very well, and some states have not done very well. And our problem is that we are not looking at disaster only as disaster, because disaster also leads to consequences that are horrendous, in the sense that there will be displacement. So people relocate in conditions which create disappointment, disgruntlement, and also job losses. So all these things are therefore the consequences which hits the national security. Because we all have heard of various kinds of war. The war itself has been moving, and we have no dearth of neighbors who can do a little mischief here and there. The question is that these displaced people, this thing, are the ready fodder for them. So the national security gets involved in another aspect. Unless we go for the preventive side in a big way, which is currently the theme and is being undertaken with right earnest, we will be repeatedly spending the amount only to lose unless we create preventive structures. An example isn't there because I think the Odisha had structures made, shelters made, and it drastically reduced the number of casualties in the past. Similar things I don't see happening in other states with the same kind of spirit. You know, as regards the components which gets affected by the natural disaster of components of national security, this would be infrastructure security, economic security, ecological security, security of natural resources, and one unit which is not part of the disaster management as such, but security of critical information infrastructure. That also is there. In this connection, when we are discussing the pandemic, I think something like security of critical information infrastructure should be thought of, because that's a very specialized activity. So one set of activity related to the pandemic should be at a lower level of skills, but we need to create structures which can deal with we have seen the way it has been handled. We have finally handled well, as we do everything else. But initial period of several months, we were groping. One day ICMR will come and give advice. Another day MHA's 6-member group will brief, and there will be 10 days without anybody briefing you. Now, this kind of a system left us also in doubt as to who is the person who can be the vehicle of information to the public. This creates uncertainty. This creates doubts in their mind about what is being done. Towards the end, we gathered ourselves, and as we manage everything else at the last moment, we did. But the point is, from the point of view of disaster management, we should create a structure which will look into it, which will attain to the problem that is envisaged. Because if we go by the thing that we are facing from the national security point of view, multiple challenges. And these challenges will not always be, as has been said by both the NSA as well as General Wej, at the border. It will not be a regular full-scale military operation, but maybe a different version of it. It will also attack all the vulnerabilities that we have. Vulnerabilities deep inside our country. Those vulnerabilities need to be tackled by some agency. The most competent agency initially would be the disaster management, because they will use vulnerabilities. So therefore, you need to have a certain awareness, even within the organization of disaster management, that what vulnerabilities could arise. It is not merely giving food, giving this thing, but it is also to ensure that they live in a surroundings where others do not come and intimidate, because we are organizing I mean, we're inviting at least the NGOs and various other people. So far, except certain pockets, the response is not very encouraging in that. Secondly, that since these are unpredicted events, we need to have specialists who can deal with these things. So they will need training. National security itself is a complex lattice of multiple and simultaneously connected challenges. Each challenge that we see, economic challenge is connected to poverty. Poverty gives rise to crime. Crime gives rise to some people getting involved with some other thing. On all this, we can say government, but it emanates from the disgruntlement of the people. So in a big chunk of people come from these disaster affected people. And that is acknowledged in even the disaster management literature. So we need to find a structure that takes care of this. Insofar as this thing concerned, that if you, General Vij did refer to it, the one UN report talked of India having lost $80 billion in 10 or 20 years. The question is, can we afford this kind of a loss? But to stop that, if we start stopping as we have started, we'll probably in 10 years or 15 years time would be in a position to say we are not losing that kind of money. We are losing, but that money can go to socially important this thing of poverty alleviation and creation of shelters, job generation, or all those things. Now we are losing out. So these are the losses of the national security aspect. In fact, it was the 2018 report of the United Nations, which said that last 20 years, India lost US $20 billion. Sorry, $80 billion. So this is a huge amount of money. Human cost is there, and human cost will always be towards the top. So we are probably at the moment in the 2020 report of the UNDRR at the third position after China and US. But the point is, if the literature shows that if we take the cost of property damage, take note of property damage as well as death toll, the cost of coping these things is going beyond the capacity of the states. So you mean more, or you may see more and more states becoming fragile, as they say, or untenable. Now that is what again brings a very alert disaster risk reduction effort to prevent. And this is what we are looking for. India's vulnerability. As per NDMA's report itself, nearly 60% land is prone to earthquake, 12% to floods. Of the coastline, 7,500 kilometers. Out of that, 5,700 kilometers are prone to cyclones. 60% of our cultivable land is vulnerable to drought. 15% of landmass from landslides and avalanches. Out of states and UTs, 27 are prone to get disasters, and over 5,000 urban local bodies are prone to urban flooding. So it's a full menu that the disaster management, risk reduction, whatever you call it, they are going to have to cope with. That is where I am quite dismayed to learn that the funding is still not coming to the disaster NDMA. Because if it doesn't come, then you cannot even prevent future discourses. Another aspect of preventing discourse, future this thing is that we see that even in the urban areas, in this cyclonic zone, in the earthquake zone, constructions are virtually unregulated. Delhi is separate. Delhi is some kind of regulation is there, but it is not there in other nations, states. Simla, etc. If we go, the structures are visibly fragile. Now the question is, that does not require money. That requires regulation by the authorities who are locally managing these. But are they aware? Are they, more importantly, are the local political people who are organizing the or managing the urban local bodies, are they aware? Now, what do we do about that? So the challenges that we have, all this combines to create a national security vulnerability for the nation. How do you cope with that? If you are, with due humility, if the NDMA is not getting members, if the ground level groups do not have members, that is something somewhere we must register that this is again a kind of disaster. If we are wanting to do this, so this aspect, I think I would just think. There are another aspect is that civilian dimension, because we also have, sir, you are a journalist, so I mean, the other kind of war that we are talking about, in that civilian role will be very important, both as to alert this machinery that is necessary to go in. So there, what we are doing, I think we are not very well prepared in that slot.
Extension.
The vulnerability causes that has been listed in various things include population growth, urbanization, economic pressures, land degradation. Now, all these things are happening, and in front of these civil bodies. Disaster reduction must begin there, and if they are not getting the manpower, should we not take it up in from the forum like the PDNS to the government that this is debilitating development. You know, as a concluding para, I had written that part of any meaningful notion of security is the idea that there is a social contract between the citizen and the elected government. The citizen will obey the rules, and in return, this expect protection from the state for his loyalty and whatever else he does. Now the question is, DRR is a beginning in that direction, where the state cares. But I had written it before I heard you, sir, that there is a lot more ground to be covered from the present state of affairs that we have. Now, I feel that we are doing a good work, but if we really want to save our losses and strengthen our national security, a lot more needs to be done. It's not a criticism of the structure, but it's a criticism of the neglect that the structure has suffered. So this is where I think a good recommendation could be made from this. Thank you very much, Jayan.
Thank you, Avzarji. Very, very incisive. And although you were very modest about what you have to say, but you have brought out some very, very pertinent issues. And in the end, it was more of what needs to be recommended to the powers that be. The part that was touched upon by General Vij also about empowerment. You underlined that also, underscored that also during your presentation. And these are very important issues. They seemingly may not look that incisive, but they certainly are. And you're absolutely right. When there is a forum like PDNS, could that be used to nudge the government or the power that be to have a closer look at the way things are? And preparedness is the first step towards feeling more secure. There's no question about it. Thank you once again. And now may I invite my good friend and old colleague, Mr. KM Singh, to make his presentation. Thank you, KM. It's all yours.
Thank you. May I request screen sharing? My PPT I have sent on the screen. Yes. Thank you. After I may say that after I finish every slide, I will say change, and then you can change. But to start with, I would like to say that I am very happy that this initiative of PDNS, which was started 5 years ago, is not only continuing, but is gaining strength from strength year after year. My subject of presentation is disaster risk reduction as part of national security. Some of you may be thinking, why the use of word DRR instead of the commonly used word disaster management? And the other query may be, that is, what is the linkage between disaster risk reduction and national security? Well, I'm happy that both these points were to a great extent covered and clarified by General Vij and Sri Haldar. As Haldar very rightly mentioned, that disaster impact each component of national security and also other disasters and environment degradation. Now, the issue that how is the linkage? The linkage is that disasters and environment degradation are non-traditional threats to national security. We only look at the traditional threats, but these are non-traditional threats, but of significance. With this introduction, I will move on to my main presentation. Please change. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. Now, this issue of India's high vulnerability from disaster, this has already been briefly covered by General Vij and Haldar. And so, but I must say that India is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. And new challenges and threats from man-made disasters like climate change, global warming, severe and emergency, etc., are steadily adding to the vulnerability of India. Some of the factors are very well known for these, that besides the geopolitical location, unplanned growth of population, unplanned urbanization, and unplanned industrialization due to rapid growth of in economy. But these are some of the factors. General which mention about the report from World Risk Index. The World Risk Index 2020 in its report has quoted some other factors making or increasing the vulnerability of India. These are poverty, slum housing, limited medical infrastructure, and weak law enforcement. So these are the vulnerability aspects. But what is most disconcerting, and that General Vij also mentioned, that this World Risk Index 2020 has mentioned, quote, India has slipped on strengthening adaptive capacities due to its inherent problems. Now, it's really very disconcerting that 15 years after the Disaster Management Act was enacted, and still, if India has slipped because of its adaptive capacity, lack of adaptive capacities, well, this is a matter which needs introspection by the policymaker, by the decision makers, that where have the things gone wrong and what needs to be done. Next. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. Now, you see, you have missed one. You have missed one slide. The earlier, no, shift is the, you have missed the slide. What is this? Disaster, yeah. Now, what is disaster risk reduction? Well, this point also has been briefly covered by General Vij. But I may mention here that with the steadily increasing frequency and intensity of disasters, leading to enormous loss of lives, the concept of disaster management is now outdated, and the concept of DRR can reduce number of disasters and thereby lives also. The components of disaster risk reduction, a concept, this has already been briefly covered, so I don't want to repeat it. Next. Next slide. Now, how has the shift globally come from the concept of disaster management to DRR? Now, this also briefly was mentioned by General Vij. And the main, I think, milestone development was the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015. It's a milestone development towards shift in the concept from DM to DRR. Now, since some of these points have already been covered by General Vij, I'll switch on to the second aspect of this point, and that is that another significant development in respect of the concept of DRR in India was the announcement of the 10-point agenda by the Prime Minister in the 7th Asian Ministerial Conference in Delhi in 2016. This new approach of DRR by the Prime Minister is like a vision document impressing upon the importance of preparedness, risk mitigation, and prevention, etc. Significantly, this 10-point agenda of the PM aligns perfectly with the Sendai framework of DRR. So India is one of the signatories, and the PM has already shown the light that this Sendai framework of DRR has to be implemented in the country in its 10-point agenda. And next. No, skip this. You are showing the old slide. You have put the wrong, that was sent day first day, where I have made some changes. This is, anyway, go ahead. Yesterday evening, the complete thing was sent here. Anyway, yes. So now, Again, you have skipped one slide. The next would be enactment of DM. I think you're mixing up the slides. The next slide was the enactment of Disaster Management Act. Yeah, you must please go sequentially. Now, this enactment of the Disaster Management Act, this point also has been fairly well covered by General Vij. But so these three-tier institutional mechanisms, since it has already been covered, what I would only like to mention is that, in my opinion, this Disaster Management Act, which was enacted in 2005, is still in transitional and evolving stage, with certain gaps in the framework and also its implementation. And this is the issue we need to discuss in course of this today's program, that where are the gaps and how is the implementation lacking. And as I mentioned, because it's still in transitional and evolving stage, I'm aware that even the Ministry of Home Affairs is also working on reviewing and revising the entire Disaster Management Act to include the new provisions, which the shortcomings have come to notice in last 15 years. Next slide. Next will be the role and responsibility. Yes. Now, this role and responsibility of NDMA, this point was also briefly covered by General Vij. So I can only mention that the mandate of NDMA was to lay down policy, and NDMA made the national policy in 2009. And also the mandate was to make the plan, and NDMA prepared the plan and it was revised again in 2019. And also NDMA was mandated to make the guidelines, and it has already made or released more than 25 guidelines on handling of various disasters. Next slide. The role and responsibility of SDMA and DDMA. Well, NDMA is the national body, national authority. Well, we say that it is only authority in the namesake, or whatever it may be, facilitator, but lays down policy, plans, guidelines. But the implementation of all these has to be done at the state level and district level. And so, if as much as NDMA, if not more, the state disaster management authorities and the district disaster management authorities are also very, very important. The most important role of the state disaster management authority is to integrate mitigation measures in development plans. Every developmental plan, every new project should have mitigation measure inbuilt. As General Vij mentioned, the 10th five-year plan categorically mentioned, quote, development cannot be sustainable without mitigation being built in developmental plans. So this is a very, very important role of SDMA. Then other point is that when we come to the DDMA is the district level authority, and they have a lot of responsibility of training and capacity building. In disaster management parlance, we say that community is the first responder. And so community training, community capacity building is most important to make the country disaster resilient. And this role has been given to DDMA. And there's much to be desired what has been done so far. Of course, in addition to that, the relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, etc. are also the role of DDMA. Thank you. Next. Next slide, please. Again, you have jump one. In between, there's another DRR initiative, good examples. You have jumped that. No, you are going further. The next slide was DRR initiatives. No, before this Bangladesh, there is one more slide. Yes. Please go ahead systematically one by one. Well, what we feel is the DRR is a new concept, but let me mention to you that it is only in our mindset. But for ages, more than 100 or 200 years, we have any number of examples of good DRR models, though the word DRR was not used there. And I'll give you a few examples to just say that how we are wiser in the previous generation, much previous generation, and we have forgotten all that and leading to depredation of the natural resources and leaving the planet in a much worse shape than what we inherited. First example of good DRR initiative I'll give you is the building the capital in Delhi. Some of you may probably be aware, and it's very interesting, that even the early 20th century, when capital was being shifted from Calcutta to Delhi, blueprint was prepared to build the capital along the bank of Yamuna River, where we have today the Rajghat and all those things. And when everything was done, a set of structural engineers came from UK for soil testing, and they said that the land near Yamuna, where the proposal is, it's alluvial land subject to liquefaction. So in flood or all the more in Delhi in Zone 4, this entire area will collapse. So they ruled out. So the search for a new good place for capital started south of Ajmeri Gate. And then they finally located an area called Rayasena Hill, which has rocky base and safe from all angles. And that's how the capital was not on the bank of Jamuna, but the capital is in Rayasena Hill, where we have the Rashtrapati Bhavan and Parliament and all. Why I wanted to mention, this is a DRR initiative. That you avoid disaster for future. And the Britishers thought of so many years ago. Similarly, some of you may have noticed in flood-prone states like Bihar, UP and all, if you go by rail, you'll find that the rail lines are 6 feet or 8 feet above the ground level. Why? Because while making the railway lines, the Britishers in everywhere, they had the survey done of last 15, 20 years of high flood mark. What was the high flood mark? And they made it sure that the railway line is 2 feet above that, so that it will withstand any amount of flood. And as a result, today those railway lines are still intact. Not only that, those are used by the flood victims for shelter when their area is inundated. So I will skip California, but next I will go to earthquake. That Japan is the most earthquake-prone country in the world, but they have the real expertise in earthquake-proof construction of building. And I may mention it is not very, doesn't sound very logical, but when I was talking to one of the Japanese structural engineers when I was in NDMA, I mentioned to him that how do you make such huge, tall building which are earthquake-proof? They say that in the layman language, I can explain to you that the difference between an earthquake-proof 50, 60-story building and the normal 50-story building is the same as the difference between an eclair chocolate and normal Cadbury chocolate. In case of normal Cadbury chocolate, it breaks with a slight press, whereas in case of eclair, it will bend and bend and bend, but it cannot break. And that is the technology. And now when Japan has gone for that technology, why can't we in India, where we have no dearth of good technocrats, go for similar earthquake-proof construction of buildings? Next. Now, this example I want to give you a good example of DRR, which has been applauded world over, and that is of Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh if you see from this graph, in Cox's Bazar area in Bangladesh in 1970, in the cyclone with 250 km/h speed, as many as 5 lakhs people perished, died. And then the Bangladesh government, with the help of UNICEF and Red Cross, started a capacity building disaster preparedness initiative in 6 districts comprising 3,500 gram Sansad. And every household, every panchayat was fully trained in various aspects. I don't want to go into that much detail. But the impact was that a similar cyclone is 1991. The casualties came down to 1,38,000. But it was further refined. In 1994, the casualties came to 127. And 1997, similar cyclone casualties came in the same area to 111. So Bangladesh has taken this has been held as a success story all over the world of disaster risk reduction. Next. Now, not that other countries have done very well and we have not done well at all. In fact, during the last 15 years, there have been a few good DRR initiatives in India, and some of these may be called success story. General, we briefly covered 3 of them: the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project, the Tsunami Early Warning System, and the National Disaster Response Force. He did cover that, but nevertheless, these 3 are the success stories of India's DRR initiative, and I'd like to add something more than what General Vij said. Next. Next slide. This National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project that was started with the help of World Bank for the coastal states of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Odisha has done remarkably well. And of course, the objective was to reduce vulnerability to cyclone and other hydrological disasters, and also enhance capacity of the states to plan a response to disaster. The main components of NCRMP are the cyclone risk mitigation infrastructure. These include cyclone shelters, roads, construction and repair of saline embankment, etc. Other is the early warning dissemination system. This includes last mile connectivity by upgrading cyclone forecasting system. And the third component is training and capacity building of all stakeholders, including community. And this project has been very successful. And why we call it a success story, I'll show you in the next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Now, I said this slide will show you why we call it a success story. This graphic will show you that in Odisha in 1999, when the super cyclone happened, 250 km/h, more than 10,000 people died in this. After that, the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project with all its components started, and the approach being zero casualty. And in 2013, when the next cyclone came, 220 km/h, the casualty was only 21. And why? Because by that, Odisha was capable. They had made a large number of cyclone shelters and school buildings, and the public were made aware, and evacuation drill was practiced so many times earlier. More than 11.5 lakh people were evacuated, and the casualty came down to 21 only. And this became a matter of research and discussion by the World Disaster Management Fraternity, that how has India suddenly made so much of progress in this. And this year in Cyclone Yas, of course, the speed was only 140 kilometer, but the casualty was only 6. So this NCRP approach of India has been commended at global forums and even in OCHA. And Odisha Cyclone Center and evacuation efforts are cited as role model all over the country, all over the world. So that's why we call it a success story. Next. Yes. Next is this cyclone early warning system. General Vijay has briefly mentioned about it. So I will only add by saying that this came into being after the 2004 tsunami. And the cyclone early warning system comprises a real-time network of seismic stations and tidal gauge with 24/7 operational tsunami warning center. This detects tsunami-genic earthquakes to monitor tsunami and to provide real-time advisory to coastal states and the neighboring countries. The Tsunami Early Warning System of India is rated as one of the best, if not the best, tsunami early warning system in the world. And that's why it is also a success story. Next. Next slide, please. You can skip this one. Next one. Please skip this. Next is the National Disaster Response Force, NDRF. No, General Vijay has already talked about it, but I would like to mention a few points about it. And that is that this is a force exclusively meant for disaster response force only and no other work. And starting from 8 battalions, it is now 12 battalions, and its strength will be raised to 16 battalions, which is more than 18,000 people. And let me tell you that no country in the world has such a large number of people, 16 or 18,000, exclusively for disaster response only. No country in the world has. So this is the unique distinction. And a gentleman which mentioned it's a multidisciplinary and multi-skilled force, trained and equipped as per international standard. Most significant thing is that the same set of people in the NDRF are capable of handling CBR and emergency. And NDRF capability and professionalism in handling CBR and emergency was tested during Fukushima disaster in Japan in 2011. And the capability of NDRF in this field came for large scale appreciation across the board in Japan. And last important point is in this connection is the response time. It has minimum response time. It's almost on the wheels, ready to move any time. And this was vindicated in case of Nepal earthquake in 2015, when the Nepal earthquake happened at 12 o'clock. And within 5 hours at 5 p.m., an aircraft with 4 teams of NDRF and equipment, etc., landed in Kathmandu. Imagine the time of moving from battalion to the airport and from airport, the flying hour to Nepal and all that. And 5 hours, it is nowhere in any country in the world has been such quick international response. So normally in SARAG says that international response takes about 36 hours. Next. Next slide, please. Next slide will be NDRF locations. Well, not to lose time, by the time the slide comes, I may tell you that the 12 battalions of NDRF are evenly located in different regions of the country, taking into account the vulnerability of the region. And so 12 battalions are located in 12 different places. But the point is that that leaves many of the states and UTs without NDRF battalions. So what has been done is that the battalion which covers 2 or 3 states at its area of operation, at least one company, that is 3 NDRF team of that battalion, is located in the capital of the state where NDRF is not there, battalion is not there. So that makes sure that NDRF is physically present in every state and every union territory. Next one. By the time the slide comes, I think we are losing a lot of time. What I wanted to mention was in the next slide that NDRF is also doing, yes, lot of DRR activities pre-disaster and during disaster. Let me mention you that the mandate of the NDRF as for the DM Act is only a specialized response to any disaster. But NDRF has taken on itself a lot of other activities which is not mandated. And one of them is, in the pre-disaster period, imparting training to the State Disaster Response Force, Civil Defense, Railway Protection Force, and Fire Services. Because these trained people become the force multiplier for NDRF in any disaster. Similarly, NDRF also conducts mock exercises in different parts of the country. And these mock exercises for different disasters, and with the involvement of all the stakeholders, all the government agencies in a pre-planned manner. The objective of holding these mock exercises are that every department has its SOP, what needs to be done by them in case of any disaster, but that remains in file and nobody knows about it. But in case of these mock exercises, every department gets to know what is his role, and also every department gets to know what is the role of other agencies. So a better coordination is taken care of when a disaster takes place. And about 3,000 mock exercises NDRF has done already so far. NDRF is also doing community capacity building, which is beyond its mandate. It's not there in the mandate. It's the mandate of the DDMA, but it's doing that. And in the last 15 years, NDRF has done train about 7 lakhs people, either capacity building on awareness generation, 7 lakhs people, which is a fairly sizable number. And of course, during disasters, it has life-saving operations. And life-saving, if anybody who is destined to die in that flood or cyclone, if he's saved, it's another DRR measure. And in the last 15 years, NDRF has saved the life of about 1,35,000 people. I'm not talking of rescue, it's saving the life. Next.
So the next slide is showing.
Next slide.
It's showing, sir,
It is.
DPR activities.
I'll move to some of the gaps in the national security preparedness. I'm waiting for the next slide.
Yeah, it has come.
This I've already covered.
Yeah, it has come
It
already.
is showing, sir, DRR activities related
Next
to
slide is, no, this I've already covered.
DRR activities. We'll move to the next slide. Rishit, next slide.
This is the next one, yes.
Yeah.
This is the next one, yes. So there
Take
are,
it back,
as I
take it
mentioned
back.
earlier also, that there are already lots of, lot of gaps so far as the DRR activity related to am I on? No. Again, I have not covered that and the slide has moved.
No, this is the gaps. This slide is on the gaps. National security preparedness, the gaps.
Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah.
This is the one. A gap. There are already a number of gaps, and some of the gaps has already been covered by General Vij and Halder. One is the implementation of the institutional arrangement as envisaged in the DM Act. The Disaster Management Act is very comprehensive, very clearly mentioning what should be the human resource and other things in the NDMA, DDMA, SDMA. And let me tell you, it has hardly been complied so far. And an NDMA general which mentioned that now, earlier the full complement of 1 vice chairman and 8 members were there. Now there are only 4. And there is no medical person. Earlier when Ebola and H1N1 was there, we had some very experienced medical officers who tied up with that. So that is not there. So no earthquake expert is there. So it has to be NDMA, DDMA and DDMA has to be very, domain experts must be there. And so the implementation of this institutional element is still a very big gap. Next is the gap is that, as I mentioned, earthquake is the major disaster. Thanks to God, we haven't had any major earthquake. But when it happens, the casualties will be a few million. I'm not saying lakhs only. And we have been lucky. But we have gone for the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project, which has been a very successful initiative. But more than that, the National Earthquake Risk Mitigation Project is all the more important, which has trained engineers and overseers, architects, and to ensure that the countries are, the buildings are safe, retrofitting needs to be done, lifelike building must be earthquake proof and all that. So this National Earthquake Risk Mitigation Project, non-availability is a big gap. Similarly, landslides. In recent years, the landslides is increasing because of the global warming and climate change and all. Uttarakhand is the one example. And the landslide, every state has a specific problem. And so the landslide national project has to be state specific. And that needs to be taken care of. That is a very serious gap. Another main gap is urban flooding. You may have seen that last 15, 20 years, starting from Mumbai flood, and now in every monsoon season, almost every town of the country gets flooded. And there's a lot of damage, may not to life, but huge damage to the property. And that is a loss of national asset. So a comprehensive plan of drainage, stormwater drainage and pre-monsoon cleaning of all the drainage system in the country is a must. Even Delhi is also a victim of that. Then another major gap that I feel is that India is an agrarian society, and the livelihood of 2/3 of our population is dependent on, directly or indirectly, on the livestock. That's their livelihood. But I remember in NDMA, I found that when we go for the rescue operations and all, it's very clear state government, animal husbandry people are not there, and the animals are not saved, and the people, villagers say that I will not go unless my animals are also shifted, because that's my livelihood, but that's not there. And that is because the Disaster Management Act nowhere talks about animals. And while most of the ministries have been given some role or the other in the Disaster Management Act, Animal Husbandry Department doesn't find mention at all. And that's a very serious gap in a agrarian society like India. And so actually from PPF, we have been working about in a big way on this to bring about amendment and to include animal risk mitigation activities in the disaster management framework. Next gap is the fire and emergency services. Well, I don't know what is the condition today, but when I was a member in DMA more than 10 years ago, I remember that we did a study of that, and you'd be surprised to know that at that time, there is internationally accepted norm of how much of manpower, equipment, and training infrastructure per lakh population or per million population should be there for the fire and emergency services. You will be surprised to know in all three, whether it's human resources or equipment or infrastructure, the gap was 90%. So that is, and that's why every day, every week, there are some hotels, some malls, some catching fire and all that. So fire and emergency services is totally neglected. It's a big gap. And lastly, the civil defense. In the year 2008, based on the group of ministers' recommendation, NDMA was asked to revamp the civil defense and from its erstwhile defunct role to provide some role in the disaster management. And I was given that role, and I prepared the report about 250 pages, which was accepted by the government. And in the parliament, the Civil Defense Act was amended, and civil defense was given a concrete role in disaster management, in terms of capacity building of people and also of in response. But after that, after the amendment, this has not been implemented at all. So these are some of the major gaps in our national security preparedness. Next.
The recommendations, sir, the slide is showing.
Next slide should be emerging. No, actually, this slide that is being shown is the one that was sent 2 days ago. Yesterday, I sent a revised PPT, and I think that has not been put. But anyway, don't bother about that. The next slide, I briefly want to, since it's not there, I want to briefly mention about that. And that is on, let me take out.
Recommendation.
Emerging challenges. Now, because that's very relevant. The recommendation I'll come later now. There are two small slides.
Okay.
Now, some of the new and emerging challenges provide a very disquieting scenario. Most important among them is climate change and global warming. Global warming may supersede all local environment issues because it has the ability to completely change the face of the earth. Himalayan glaciers are steadily shrinking, and it is estimated that in the next around 50 years, the glaciers will stop discharging water. This will drastically cut down water availability downstream, affecting the agrarian economy of UP and Bihar. It may lead to tremendous social upheaval as these regions already suffer from huge poverty. Next emerging challenge is nuclear emergencies. Now, radiation release due to any reason can be, yes, this is the one. On the second one, radiation release due to any reason can be devastating. Chernobyl is an example. With modern reactor design, a catastrophic release of radiation is highly unlikely, but nevertheless possible. This can happen due to factors beyond the control of the operating agency. For example, human error, system failure, sabotage, earthquake, cyclone, and tsunami. I have not finished the previous one, emerging challenges. You have moved to imperatives. Please revert back to the one that I was showing earlier. Another important challenge is chemical and industrial emergencies. Please go back to the one that you were showing. I have not finished that.
Yes, sir, it is showing. Emerging challenges. The slide is showing, sir.
So next one is chemical and industrial emergency. India has already witnessed the Bhopal gas tragedy in 1984. Now India has thousands of major hazard units. Increasing export demand and enabling government initiatives or incentives in the recent years have been the key growth drivers for the Indian chemical industries. This calls for a comprehensive disaster risk reduction plan for each of the sensitive chemical industries with foolproof on-site and off-site security plans for the major hazards. Of course, the next one is biological. Now, this is a major issue, but the point is that we are already having a full-fledged discussion on pandemic, so I don't want to elaborate on that. And last is urban flooding, which I already have covered, because urban flooding is a man-made disaster, and this challenge is increasing year after year. Next one. Next one is imperatives. The three important imperatives that I have listed are mentioned here, but these are only illustrative. There may be many more. Now,
Yes, sir. Slide is showing, sir.
Yeah, it's all right. Now, the point is, as you would notice, that Disaster Management Act gives an impression as if it's only government who could do everything. There is no inclusion of private sector, academicians, researchers in the DM framework. So this needs it's a collective effort. Also, civil society is totally nowhere in the picture. So an enabling environment for involvement of civil society at all levels, national, state, district, block, panchayat level, is very important. Civil society have no role at all at the moment. And then lastly, the third imperative, according to me, is effective measures for vulnerability reduction for the most vulnerable section of society. That is elderly people, people who are disabled, ladies, children and all. There has to be some effective measures for them also for their disaster risk reduction and their safety and precaution. Next one. The last two slides on recommendations. I don't know whether I have taken longer time than, yes, I have already exceeded my time, but the whole thing got delayed earlier also. Next one is recommendation. In the next two slides, yeah, in the next two slides, I have listed 9 recommendations, but there are maybe many more. I couldn't have listed more than 9. The first issue of strengthening NDMA, SDMA, DDMA as envisaged in the Act have already been covered in the initial gaps, and Jalviz has also mentioned about it. The second issue relating to NDRF is important. The NDRF has come up as a highly professional force as its superintendence, direction and control remained with NDMA as provided in the Act. Till the year 2014, when I was a member, I did not let NDRF go out of NDMA's control because that is the mandate of the Act. But now things have changed. NDRF is no more under NDMA. And it's not a good sign because the ministry may take a different view. And the moment any deployment of NDRF in law and order things start, the quality of the professionalism of the force will go back. So it must be, the Act clearly provides that superintendence, direction, and control of NDRF with NDMA, that must be restored. Then next is SDRF, State Disaster Response Force. All the states need to have a State Disaster Response Force to handle level 1 and level 2 disasters in the respective states. Some of the states have constituted SDRF, but it is totally an ad hoc arrangement. There is no legal provisions. So it may be worthwhile to include a provision for the SDRF also in the DM Act as is there for the NDRF. Then next is the civil defense. I've already discussed this issue earlier. Then recent developments related to pandemic only reinforces the suggestion of inclusion of health emergency in the Act. There is no denying the fact now. Then launching of comprehensive mitigation projects for all major disasters. That's very, very important, be it earthquake or landslide. These also have already covered in the gap, but this can be our strong recommendation. I've already last one. Please go to the next slide.
Yes, sir. We are on next slide. Recommendations continued.
So the second one is the amendment of the DM Act. So I've already discussed this issue of a gap in the Act by non-inclusion of animals and animal husbandry department, which is a glaring omission for India, which is an agrarian economy, and this must find mention in the Act. Next is about the highway accidents. Well, I don't know, some of you may be aware, we conducted a 2-day seminar, PPF, on highway accidents. And what came out was appalling. India has only 6% of road or highways. But you'll be surprised to know that on the average, around 1.5 lakhs people die in highway accidents every year. And highway alone, 6%, not all, and these are only reported figures. So this can be mitigated considerably by ensuring requisite roadside infrastructure for medical emergency, as is there in the Western world. We have seen how they are on the roadside, they have telephones, availability of hospitals and all. We are constructing highway, and highway is doing very well. But then the casualty will increase unless the medical infrastructure is linked. And so our suggestion is, which is the suggestion of Planning Commission also in all projects, that the 10% of the highway project cost should be earmarked for ensuring roadside infrastructure, medical infrastructure for this. And of course, my last recommendation is to have a harmonization between recommendation of Finance Commission and provisions of the Act. General Bridge mentioned about this. This is important to ensure implementation of recommendations of 15th Finance Commission for long-term recovery to create an appropriate mitigation fund. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I have taken a little longer time, but I was told that I will take 45 minutes, but the whole thing got. So my apologies for delay. But thank you very much. Now, if you have any time for question and answer session, or are we too late, the general partner to decide.
Yeah, actually, since we have run out of time, probably we'll have to save the questions for tomorrow when we also interact with the team from NDMA, and that might be an appropriate time to pose questions based on the kind of background that we've been given in these three outstanding presentations. And particularly Mr. K.M. Singh's presentation was, I might add the word passionate. It was an extremely passionate presentation coming straight from the heart and from deep knowledge of his subject. Of course, General Vij had laid the foundation for this, this particular session by covering the entire gamut of disasters and pandemics, and the linkage was adequately covered by Mr. Haldar, who beautifully connected the concept to the realities in terms of what impact it has on the national security. And Mr. K.M. Singh has actually articulated not only theoretical recommendation, but specific ones, which actually would enable the organizers of this PDNS to actually concretize them into firm recommendations when we look at the outcome of the entire event. So most thankful. It doesn't matter if you've exceeded by a few minutes, because it was well worth it. But in the end, I would be remiss if I didn't ask General Vij if he has any last minute remarks to make before I declare this session closed. Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. And I must thank Mr. Haldar and Mr. K.M. Singh, of course. You made adequate mention of that. But for them, perhaps it wouldn't have been complete. Two things I'd like to say. I made a mention during my presentation or my talk that this is an all-party concept. It started from Mr. Vajpayee's time, who laid really the foundation for this, and it went on to Dr. Manmohan Singh's time and Indian Ocean Tsunami when it was brought in. So what happened now, after the last government left, the present government came in, they reduced the scope and the authority of an organization which already was lacking in empowerment. So it has become an authority which is an organization which is incomplete. Number two, mitigation was a very major and important part of it, because response we were always good. now the NDRF has brought in a lot of specialization because of the specialist equipment that they have. Earlier, the army was doing it in a big way, but army didn't have some of this equipment. Like I would mention, like in case of an earthquake, you didn't have the sensors to see the shallow burials, you know. You have to dig down the place to get a man out. But now with those sensors, you can even know that a person is buried 20 feet deep or 10 feet deep or whatever it is. So NDRF has brought in a lot of specialization, but the point is that you have to move further. This is just one part. And that was response. The response was being done in any case pretty well, reasonably well earlier also. But what about the other mitigation project? Mr. K.M. Singh did mention that if there's an earthquake tomorrow, and we worked all that out during the time we were there and gave a very detailed sort of a project to the government of India on how the earthquake can be handled and how we should, work on the construction activities and what should be the, limit restrictions laid down on that. And even went to the extent that the housing loan should be given only when and house construction is to be designed by the structural engineers as a disaster resilient construction. So lots of things of that kind are done. There's no time to now talk of that. But mitigation is an important part. The health emergency part has been brought in now. There was a member for the health emergency and who did a tremendously good job. That was General Bharadwaj, who was the old DG Armed Forces Medical Services. The chemical, biological, nuclear, we had Mr. Bhattacharya, who was member of the BARC, rather is the chairman of the BARC at that time, and he got shifted to us. So this authority will be of use if only we give them all members, give them the empowerment, and last but not the least, the money. Money, unfortunately, in the government of India, the system is, and I also learned, mind you, after shedding my uniform, I was not aware of most of these things. They'll come only to the ministry. The ministry will further allocate it to you. Now, there's a problem in that. Of course, okay for the accounting part, but how much they'll want to give you, not give you, is the kind of interest they take into that. And the time they have to devote to that particular aspect. So these are the problems there. Of course, a lot of work has been done. And members who are there now, down their status has been downgraded by 3 notches. They've been brought down to the research secretary level, which was not the idea. The idea was to have a body in all levels, the national, the state, and also in the district, more on the national and the state, which are full-time dedicated and who had the authority. Now, if you don't do that, then only you're serving half the purpose, and that is perhaps not going to deliver. And sooner than later, we will have to get back to perhaps an improvement on the organization which was set up earlier, rather than restrict the scope of that. And national security is directly related to your the state of your, I would say, affluence. If we are getting richer, you will have more resources to devote. If you are getting poorer by the day, and I did mention that it is a vicious cycle. If you are poor, you will suffer from disaster. And if you suffer from disaster, you will get poorer. So this you got to take. And if you are a poor nation, you will have a problem on national security. I think this subject needs to be given a lot of attention once again. And we should not be just satisfied by responding well to a disaster. No, that is not the answer. We must prevent a disaster. We must look at the causative factors and must make sure that we take all precautions against them. That's all, but thank you very much once again for your organization to give us this opportunity, and I hope you will include all these recommendations in your paper to the government, whatever you said to them. Thank you. On behalf of my other colleagues.
Thank you very much, sir. General Vij and the other 2 eminent speakers, Mr. Haldar and K.M. Singh. I understand Dr. Kelkar wanted to say something, and at the risk of exceeding the time a little more, I think it will be well worth listening to what he has to say.
No, General Patikar, I really wanted to thank KM and General Vij and Haldar for really outstanding session. And I think this would be and they have fortunately also given us a forward-looking recommendations, not just analyze what has gone wrong. So I think this form of outstanding, great basis for our report. So I really want to thank you for making this very, very productive and useful session. Thank you.
Dr. Mashelkar also had.
No. I just wanted to echo what Dr. Vijay Kelkar was saying. You know, DRR is the key. It is very clear. You know, reduction. And therefore, this message, not just DM, but DM to DRR, I think is emerging very, very strongly indeed. I just would take a couple of minutes to just say that Singh Saab mentioned about the multi-purpose cyclone shelters, etc. I was the DG of CSR when I remember Indian Red Cross as well as German Red Cross had approached us where these designs were done. And in the cyclone Falin, for example, we had put up some 75 such multi-purpose cyclone shelters, and they saved lakhs of lives as a matter of fact. And same thing was the case with Fani. And as far as the Bhopal disaster that you referred to, I was the technical assessor for the inquiry commission. I've seen with my own eyes. I was on the accident tank within almost 96 hours after the accident took place. And I've seen how it was completely preventable and what conditions were responsible for that. And same thing for Maharashtra Grass-Cracker complex when the explosion killed 34 people. Again, Prime Minister Chandrasekhar had appointed a committee under my chairmanship to look at again completely. So, Singh Saab, your presentation was fantastic, as were the sort of fantastic inputs from Haldar Saab and General Vij, sort of broad vision. So I just want to echo what Vijay Kelkar said. This has been a fantastic learning session for us, and very strong recommendations should emerge from this section.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It all remains for me to say that this has been an outstanding, a rousing start to the proceedings of this event. And we're grateful to General Vij and Mr. Haldar and KM Singh for really making presentations which, frankly, since I've been involved in the sequencing of sessions and deciding on the content of each session, this has exceeded expectations. This has not only exceeded expectations, but it has also set a certain fundamental basis to where we go from here. And that, as the convener, is the greatest advantage that that the event could hope to have. So thank you once again. Can't really thank you enough. And even the participants would agree with me that though we did exceed the time, but every minute that we listened to the presentation was well worth the excess time that we took. Thank you very much. I now would close this session and invite you to once again log in for the next session, which begins at 6 o'clock. We'll be on the air from 5:30 onwards, and you can connect with us anytime in case you have any difficulty. I'm sorry there was a little problem of those slides, but let me explain why that happened. Because it was the bandwidth issue at Mr. KM Singh's end. The kind of bandwidth we have here and the one that was available where Mr. KM Singh was speaking from was such that there was a delay where we could see the next slide, he couldn't. And therefore, he thought that the slide hadn't changed. So that was a little confusion, but I'm glad that it all got sorted out in the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not on the, my video is off, but don't worry about that. As long as the presentation was complete. And I must thank Dr. Mashelkar and Vijay Kelkar for very complimentary and nice. It's a morale booster to us. We are very happy if this session went off well. And of course, it's a combined effort of all three of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now see you once again in the evening. like I said, we start at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will